Dogs wanting to go out and all of a sudden. Oh boy. Anyway. Uh by the way, it is snowing, you can see up there. Got some more snow coming down. It's supposed to stop. Actually, yeah, I think I spoke too soon. I said that it was done snowing, and I don't think it is. Because I think it's going to go till 1 in the morning, and 9 p.m. was going to be the heaviest. So, yeah, I think I spoke too soon. Anyway, I'm just hoping I don't have to pay the plow guy to come plow. I'm getting off easy this winter and last winter, so. Anyway, if he comes though, that's cool. I like the snowplow guy. Hey Grace, how you doing? Welcome and salutations to you too. We're gonna hope you're having a great day. As you can see by the title, it says Big Problems with the New Testament. I'm gonna scroll through the New Testament. We are gonna scroll through the New Testament. Of course, we won't get through all of it today, but we're just gonna go. I'm gonna wing it, and I'm gonna just point out obvious problems, huge problems, huge, as Donald Trump would say, and yeah, huge problems in the New Testament. The fluffy white stuff, yeah, actually, you guys aren't supposed to get as much as we are. We're supposed to get a lot more. I think you guys were going to have like 2 hours or something, and we're going to have 12 hours. It was supposed to go till from 1 p.m. till 1 a.m. And that usually adds up a lot, so. Anyway, but it stopped for a while, and then they kind of downplayed it a little bit. But it started back up, and then I just remembered, I looked at a graph yesterday to how much snow it's going to come today, and it was, yeah, actually, the worst is yet to come. Doesn't Dee want it? The snow? No, I'm sure she doesn't. Actually, it was snowing in Florida. It was snowing darn near Arizona. I don't know if it quite did, but people that usually don't. South Carolina, North Carolina, I think. Anyway, people that usually don't get snow are getting snow. So, I always dream about moving down south every winter. I get on the real estate sites and I start looking for houses down south. And I just don't know what state I would want to live in. You know. And I don't know. I love it here, spring, summer, and fall. So I don't know. It'd be nice to have both. Go down there in the winter. I don't know. I think even like Kansas or Missouri, I think is even. I don't think they get that much snow. Well, hey, up yours. How you doing? Evening. I hope all's well. Yes, I hope all's well with you too. I've had a wonderful bunch of days, months, and years. Well, hey, Maranatha to you too. See you in the air. Good evening to Tribulation Safe and up yours. I hope you're all doing well. Yeah, we had a couple of well, hey Dee, good to see you. Welcome. Hey everyone, good to see everybody. Yeah, we had a couple days of high 30s and it was very very nice, warm. It might even almost got to 40, but now it's back cold again. But it was nice while it lasted. I did some outside stuff and whatnots. But yeah, we got some snow on and off, so hopefully it don't add up to enough where I have to get the plow guy out here. Because I got a couple 100 feet of driveway, and I got a big parking lot, and so I just don't want to do it myself anymore. It's worth paying somebody, but it's nice when I can get by without it. Yeah, there's D. Come up and collect your snow. Yeah, we got snow coming in. Actually, just northern Minnesota. A friend of mine lives by the Mall of America in Bloomington, and it doesn't look like they were going to get hardly anything. So hopefully I don't either. Anyway, yeah, so tonight we're going to talk about big problems with the New Testament. And we're not going to get through the whole New Testament. I'm just going to start at the beginning, Matthew. We'll start at the Gospels. I don't even know if I'll get through the Gospels, maybe, because I'm just going to wing this off the top of my head. And if I ever do make a video, I will be more PowerPoint kind of, because I'm sure I'm going to forget a lot of things. But off the top of my head, we're going to scroll through at least the Gospels, and just I'm going to point out some very, very huge problems and obvious issues. So yeah, anyway, I'm looking forward to spring. It is February 1st. That's good. This is kind of a short month. My grandson was born on leap year, which is the 29th. So he doesn't have a birthday. He can pick 28th or the 1st. And I had a boss when I first got out of nursing school. I had a boss, the first doctor office I ever worked in, and she had a leap year birthday too. So she only counted her actual birthdays. She was much younger. Yeah, so it's a non-leap year. February 1st, anyway. A couple more months, we'll be into spring, and I'll be outside. Can't wait. I'm getting a little bit cabin fever here. So I figured I'd come on and just stroll right through the New Testament. We'll start with Matthew. You can add whatever you want, your comments. Actually, you know what? I got to get something else up so I can see you guys. Wait, can I? You know, Kathy, that you and old babe. I am old. Well, it's perspective, I guess. I just saw somebody that lived to 114, I think. Anyway, I saw some old timers. Jimmy Carter lived to 100. Betty White lived to 100. Well, no, 99.99, because it was so close to her 100th birthday. They already shot her 100th birthday special. And anyway, I'm going to pull up your comments so I can see you guys, because I really can't do two things at once. All right. Put that over here. All right. Messages. There you go. All right. So yeah, if I ever start posting videos, I should do it now when I'm in the winter. But 29 and old, yeah, well, I'm a little bit past that. Hate to admit it. No, actually I don't. I'm proud I lived this long. Dang, who thought? I didn't think I'd make it to 30 when I was young. Anyway, so I'm going to go over here. I'm going to try to center this so you guys can see it. And we're going to go through the 4 Gospels. I don't know how far we're going to get through. This will be kind of like a part 1, because there's no way I'm going to get through all the problems off the top of my head I can think of in all the books. I can't remember how many books there are. With age comes wisdom. That's right. Yeah. All right. So now, problem number 1. In the Gospels, we have Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Before I even start going over this, and by the way, I put up English Standard Version. Why? Because it's got titles. It breaks it up into actual different things, so it's just easier to go over that way. King James doesn't label anything, and I don't want to go off track or anything, but King James will like start a new chapter like right here in the middle of something. You know what I mean? Anyway, you won't even know if you're listening to the same story, a different story, or a new story. You don't even know. But anyway, but they're also not in order in the way that they're written. Mark, the Gospel of Mark was written first. And by the way, what I have heard over and over from the biblical scholars and people who really study, is that there were actually many Gospels, maybe even 100. There were a lot of Gospels, but they were all weeded out. You know what? There's a Gospel of Mary Magdalene. There's a Gospel of Thomas. There's all kinds of other Gospels. And so they weeded it down to 4 gospels. Well, I say we, I don't know if it's the Catholic Church or who was ever in charge of weeding stuff out. Anyway, so they got down to 4 gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And the problem is, none of them are proven to be a disciple at all. The only ones that are mentioned in the 12 disciples is John, which is probably not even the same John, because all that stuff was written probably long after John died. But nonetheless, and there was a Matthew, the tax collector, but there was no Luke and there was no Mark. I think there is one time a Mark mentioned, and I think it was probably in the book of Acts. I don't even think it was in the Gospels. But anyway, and that was probably Peter's son or something. And it was spelled different, M-A-R-C or something. Anyway, but there is no, in the 12 disciples, let's just leave it there. There's no Mark and there's no Luke. As a matter of fact, Luke was just a, he was somebody who was kind of, sounds like it was paid by, who was it, Theophilus? No. Who was Luke working for? Anyway, he starts both Luke and Acts out addressing, it's a letter to this person who is telling him to follow Paul. And so Luke, writing the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of, it used to be called the Acts of the Apostles. And so when Luke wrote it, it was called Luke 1 and Luke 2. The book of Acts was called Luke 2. It was Luke 1, Luke 2. But anyway, then they changed it to the Acts of the Apostles. But yeah, he wrote both. But it's strange because he tells you in there that he starts out Luke writing to, who's he writing out to? It's in the first paragraph, whatever. And then the in the book of Acts, same thing, starts out writing to this guy who's paying him or whatever to follow Paul and report on Paul. So Luke was never a disciple. And Mark was never one of the 12 disciples either. And remember, they might have been an apostle or something, but the disciples, in order to be a disciple, you had to, the rules are right in the gospel. I keep saying gospel. The rules are in the book of Acts. In order to be a disciple, and they wanted 12 for some reason. They wanted 12. And so that's why when Judas Iscariot took his life, then they had to replace him with somebody else. In the book of Acts, they'll tell you that we're replacing Judas Iscariot. We're replacing Judas with one of you guys, and the requirements to be picked is that you have to have been with Jesus from his baptism all the way up to the death, burial, and resurrection, right? And so that was only a certain amount of people. So Matthias and somebody else, they cast lots, they shook dice, or cast lots, and the lots fell to Matthias. So Matthias filled back in, so there was another 12. So the 12 disciples had to be with Jesus from the baptism all the way up to, the death, burial, resurrection. So otherwise, I think you're an apostle or something like that. So, and what I don't get is how later on, after Jesus dies and everything, Paul comes along, and somehow he's got authority over these 12 who were disciples. The apostle Paul is telling the disciples what up. So anyway, what happened to my comments? Okay, I missed them. So anyway, but you have the earliest of the 4 gospels is the Gospel of Mark. And Mark is much plainer, and it's only got it's got 16 chapters. It's a lot different. It doesn't have Jesus' nativity, the birth of Jesus, and all that stuff. It doesn't have that. It just has And actually, at the end of it, in chapter, there's 16 chapters in Mark, and as opposed to like Matthew's got 28 chapters. I don't know. Luke's got a bunch, 27 or something. John's got a bunch, but Mark only had 16 chapters. As a matter of fact, most of the 16 chapter is added way later by a different author. And what part is that? About the resurrection. Because in Mark, the first gospel written, there was no resurrection of Jesus. They went to the grave, they went to the tomb. I could get into that when we get to Mark. But anyway, Mark is much different. So when you get to Matthew here, which was actually written after Mark, Matthew has taken upon himself to add a whole bunch of details that the original Mark didn't have. And one of the huge things that very much appeals to the Romans at the time, who they were preaching this to, is a demigod. And so Mark doesn't have none of that. Mark doesn't have the virgin birth. And as a matter of fact, Paul wrote his letters long before any of the Gospels. All right, so Paul wrote all his letters before they even started writing the Gospels, because Paul is dead and gone in 63, 65 something. Before they even started writing the Gospels, Paul had written all his letters. And you know what? Paul never wrote anything about no resurrection or anything like that. Actually, Paul didn't really talk about Jesus that much, but probably because he never met him. You know what I mean? Anyway, we'll get to that later. But remember, they're writing to the Romans, and these Romans, they like these demigods. They like the daddy being a god and mommy being a human girl and virgin girl, by the way. And so, because for probably 1,000 years or more, who knows? But for recorded time, long before Jesus came, there were all these demigods, and where are they? They're teaching the people in Rome, these Christians, and that are not Jewish, converting them into Christianity or whatever. And how do you do that? You bait them in with a demigod, Jesus. And Jesus never said, now of course he calls God his father, but everybody there did. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, everybody, Moses, they all call him father. But Jesus is never out of his mouth. Like if you buy a red letter version, King James, which is probably the first King James I ever bought, red letter, so you could tell what Jesus came out of Jesus' mouth. And you look at those red letters, and never out of his mouth it says, I'm going to go die for you for my sins and all this stuff. Anyway, it's just so much I can't even really get into it. But one thing that Matthew adds, now really we should be starting with Mark, but we're just going to start the way that it goes in the Bible. So Mark Matthew has added this, another thing, because it seems like Matthew and Luke are pushing for to prove that he's a Messiah. Now, none of the things on Jesus' checklist was even on the Messiah checklist. Nothing. Not dying for sins, not on the checklist. The whole Old Testament is completely different of the end times and they don't really have an end times. They just have a time where they're going to run the earth and everything from Jerusalem, and there'll be a king and all that stuff. And so what you have here is they're putting in a genealogy of Jesus Christ, which is not accurate at all. And so if you compare the genealogy list here, because Luke does the same thing. Luke also has a genealogy list, but it's nowhere near this. And if you want to get real, both Matthew and Luke's genealogy list is wrong. And as a matter of fact, I'm gonna show you real quick. So the first problem, huge problem, it gets on chapter 1, verse 1. So you don't get very far into Matthew before you realize that there's a problem. So I'm gonna type in Matthew versus Luke's genealogy, because they're the only two gospels. They're the only two gospels that have the genealogy. And why do they have a genealogy? Because they're trying to show you that in two different ways, in two different, they're taking two different routes, right, to get to a destination. The destination they want you at is that Jesus is from the bloodline of David, from the King David, because in the Old Testament, the Messiah has to be from the bloodline of King David down through Solomon, okay? Because I'm going to show you, I'm going to try to get the easiest one on here. But as you can see, there's lots. If you type in Matthew versus Luke's genealogy, you'll see it's two completely different things, okay? And neither one of them have it right. And one of them, I'm just going to show you real quick. We'll pick one of them. Yeah, it's much different. But as you can see, let's see, one of them has the bloodline coming down through Nathan, which is a no-go because it has to come down through Solomon. So, why are the and here, you can just look this up. Why are the genealogies in Matthew and Luke different? Yeah, well, there is no explaining it. It just is. So you can look this up yourself. Let me just move this real quick. But yeah, it is different. And I think it is Luke's that has it coming down through Nathan. I can't remember which one, but that one would be scratched off right away. And then when they end up down here, you got Joseph and Mary, but there's two different Josephs. One is a Joseph that's through the daddy side, Joseph's side. And the other Joseph is Mary's dad. Because as we all know, they do not do bloodlines through the moms, only the dads. So this one here, Matthew has it, Joseph being the dad. Which, if the dad is God, then he's out of the running for the Messiah, because you have to prove that your dad, and you have to, in order to be the Messiah in the Old Testament, and apparently the New Testament too, right? They're agreeing that you have to be descended from the bloodline of David through Solomon. And as you can see, well, it's all blurry, but the daddy side has it coming through Solomon. I don't know where, it's too blurry to see. And the mom has it coming through Nathan, I think. Can't remember. But anyway, neither of them are right. Both of them are way off. And the whole point of the bloodline is to convince you that he's coming from the right bloodline in order to be the Messiah. Now, why? Because they love the Gospels? Oh, yeah. No Shakespeare tonight? No. Maybe next week. I gotta shrink this down because my camera don't fit on it. All right. So, anyway, right away, that might be better. Kind of shrunk it down a little bit. So, right away, the first gospel, well, the first one that you see in the New Testament is Matthew. And the genealogy is messed up. And you know what is funny? Is they try to make it really super special at the end of the bloodline thing in Matthew. They try to make it really special that, so all the generations from Abraham to David were 14 generations. From David to the deportation of Babylon, 14 generations. And the deportation of Babylon to the Christ, 14 generations. They're trying to make it seem special there too. And I've proven, and we've gone over this before. Here, let's look that up then. The 14 generations that in Matthew. And we're going to show you that's false too. There is not 14, 14, 14. They fudged the numbers and they made at least one name twice to make it 14, 14, 14. It's not really 14, 14, 14. What's the deal with the 14? You can look this up. And you see that I'm not the only one that's seeing all this stuff. So anyway, in Matthew 1:17 describes groups of 14 generations. And by the way, what would that prove? Nothing. So what? I have 14 generations and 14 and 14 in my family too. What is that? Okay, so I'm just going to show you. Here's an example. Here's the one that I used in a live stream a long time ago. Now I've deleted 2,500 live streams over the last 8 years because I kept getting strikes and strikes and strikes, and and it's scary. I had probably 100 different strikes, and most were warnings. And then they started giving me real strikes to where it's going to take my channel down, so I just removed them all. And I don't agree with a lot of that stuff anyway. All right, so here you go. Here's your problem with the 14, 14, 14. If you go through these, I don't think they're actually correct. But here you have, see you have Jaconius. See, Jaconius is number 14. Well, they repeated Jaconius up here. So, because this would have only been 13. So right here, they doubled Jaconius because it would be 14, 14, 13. I mean, this is the same thing that people, a lot of these Christians on YouTube do. They fudge the facts to make you have to believe. All right. Let me see. D, hold on a second. All right. You have to rely on the Holy Spirit to answer problems, or common sense. Would you pray for my sister Carolyn? Yes, her right eye started bleeding not quite a week ago. She got a shot. The vision is still murky. Last Monday, her eyelids closed. She's taking medicine to unclog the glands. The eye is opening easier. She still has dizziness. Wow, they know. So they know it's what, an infection or something in her eye. Sorry to hear that, D. Yes, everybody, please pray and send her healing prayers. And if you see her, D, I would put your hand right over her eye and envision it healing in your mind, and her too. That's what I would do, definitely. Pray too. They seem to know what's wrong. Good. Well, if it's on the way getting better, it's the right direction. Sorry to hear that, D. I sure hope Carolyn gets better quick. Hope every day is better and better. All right. Let me just check the comments real quick. Yeah, we are well seasoned. That's a good way to put it. Let's see this. All right. I would ask her, but she may accept me putting my hand over her eye. Yeah. Put your hand over her eye and pray. Yeah, put your hand over her eye and pray. We're supposed to be able to heal each other, right? Well, hey, Pinch. Wow, good to see you. What's up with you? Yeah, it came on a little bit earlier, hopefully, so people aren't all asleep. But good to see you. People are going to be excited to see you. Don't see you very often. Anyway, I hope you and your family, your wonderful family, are doing well. Good to see you. Many moons. Yes, many moons. As they say. How you been doing? Anyway, I hope you and your family are doing awesome. You got a really nice family. Yeah, good to see you, Pinch. Yeah, so I figured I'd start coming on and start doing some of these informational videos. For a while there, I just kind of stopped the nightly live streams. It was after 8 years, every single night for 8 years. I had to make a change. It wasn't serving me, and probably nobody else. So I'm going to be coming on with these more informational videos that might wake some people up. Anyway, you're all well? Good. That's good to hear. Love your information views. Changed my life. Thank you. You know what's funny, Pinch? I was just thinking about you. I was just thinking about you 20 minutes before I came on here. Information business change, yeah, and that's what I want to do. I want to point out to people, because the problem is people think this is straight out of God's mouth and you have to abide by it. But then the next page is a contradiction. So how are you going to abide by that? God wouldn't write a book like this. Yeah, it got me out of that stinking cult. Me too. And isn't it nice to be out of the cult? Because what the cult does is really takes away your individuality. Like Kathy had to stop being Kathy. You know what I mean? Pinch had to stop being Pinch, and so forth. And so yeah, I'm glad, I'm happy to be free and do what I think is right, which is really common sense. And really, if the Bible teaches you one thing throughout Old and New Testament, is to do unto others as you had do unto you. Just treat people the way you want to be treated. You know what I mean? I think it'll be just fine. Love when things work out that way. Think of someone and bam, they're there. Yes, that is something. It happens a lot, actually. 190 plus contradictions, like what Jeremiah 8:8 says. Yeah, I like that 190. I think I can't remember, but yeah, 193 or something, almost 200 contradictions. And I personally weeded a couple out that actually could go both ways. And I can't remember what kind of contradiction that is. There's a certain contradiction where it could be both ways. I like watching. I like watching those true murder mysteries on YouTube, and I watch a lot of those police interrogations, and you'll see it in there too when the police interrogate somebody. It can be both ways. Something can be true, and then something sounds opposite can also be true. So I have weeded those out, and I pointed those out, but 95% of them are contradictions that you can't weed out. Your ears are burning? All right. Yeah, I was just thinking about it probably, well, right before I came on here. Anyway, and it is just really, really refreshing. And you know what? It's good to go back to having common sense about things, because what people don't realize is that you have to really kind of put a lot of common sense aside if you're going to study the Bible, and it's always going to be, well, it's not a contradiction. It's God's ways are not our ways, or sometimes we don't understand what God's talking about. Well, you know what? If God was going to write a book, he would make it so his dumb little humans could understand it. Because if it's beyond our understanding, then why give it to us? Why give us a book that we can't understand? It's full of contradictions. Like I said, an IKEA manual to put your coffee table together isn't even complicated. A work manual, if you go start a job, you get a work policy manual. You're not going to have 10,000 people all disagree what that manual says. 95% of people are going to agree that, yeah, this is what it says. So if IKEA and every workplace and everything else can write something for humans that makes sense, why can't God? Yeah, religion is control, condemn, critical thinking, and you can control the sheep. Yes. Exactly. There would be only one interpretation. Exactly. It would be, you know what? It would be a book that would be perfect. You couldn't find an error if you tried your whole life every day. And also, it would be in a language for everybody. And it would be in something that was tamper proof. Like, I don't know, he could write it in the sky. He could put it on a mountain. Yeah, you're right. It would be one denomination, no questions. And I do believe in spirituality. I do believe that there is a God force, a God above that's given us all helpers, which makes a lot more sense. We're given spirit guides when we're born. We're given, our ancestors are there. Our loved ones are on the other side. We have all kinds of people helping us, angels to protect us. We got all kinds of stuff, helpers. And they're sitting around like the Maytag repairman, because we're taught that, oh no, you got to just pray to this Yahweh, the God of war, and Jesus, a demigod, And you got to get real. You got to get real. What you're worshiping is a demigod, and it is a blood sacrifice. Your common sense is not reliable. See, that's scary. I would not want to go through life thinking my common sense is not reliable. That'd be scary. You trust your God-given common sense. Me too. I noticed that, Trip. If you say you love the Gospels, yeah, you do have to, and especially, I'm going to tell you, you might not notice if you don't really read that often, but if you sit down and study, I did for 8 years, every single day, like a college scholar. Every day, if I was at work, I had headphones on. I had it playing. Flesh is weak. We gotta exercise and get it stronger. And call Grace ancient and Kathy old. Shame on. Yeah. Yep. No, because at my age, I look at people who live to 100. My dad is 92 years old. If I live as long as my dad is living right now, I still have 30 years left. So, yeah, I don't look at it that way at all. Because I'll tell you what, I see people my age that look really rough, and health is not good. And I work on my health. I work on a lot of stuff to, well, I guess as the Christians say, preserve my temple. Yeah, flesh is not weak with common sense. It's right. And we're born, right? I believe that we're born with these rules in our head. And actually, I don't see my comments on here regarding my sister. Yeah, they're here. You just got to scroll up. Oh, D, make sure you're on live chat, not top chat. Live chat, not top chat. Because top chat, it actually says that top chat hides some comments that you shouldn't probably see. Well, thanks. I think I can figure out which ones I should see or not. But yeah, your comments are there, D. Scroll up, or just, they might have censored them. Top chat will censor your comments. Live chat, you get them all. Still not there? Oh, I see it. I'll make sure it's still there. Go back. Right here. There it is. I got a cord on my phone because it's plugged in. Because these live streams suck the battery out big time. Yeah, it's still there, D. I don't know why you can't see it. It's weird. But anyway. All right, cool. It's so fun to have you back in here, Pinch. All right. Because I like feedback. I like you guys all giving feedback. So the more feedback, the better. Because, hey, if you see something I'm getting wrong, tell me. You know what I mean? Because I am not too prideful. I've learned that I've been wrong about a lot of stuff about this. And by the way, it's still not there? Did you ever catch the rest of the story? No, Pinch, I did not. We haven't seen Che back since, so hopefully the girl in the closet didn't get him again. Yeah, we can see him, D. I don't know what's wrong on that end over there. So anyway, so the 14 generation thing, that is also a bust, okay? Just proved it. And by the way, what is that supposed to mean? Who cares? I could count out 14 of mine. Well, I don't even know 14 people. All right. The birth of Jesus Christ. Now, here's another thing. Completely, from here on out, it completely, well, not here on out, it continues. You're on early? Yes. Hey, Prophet Logic, good to see you tonight. Welcome. Maybe if you step out of the chat and come back. Yeah, maybe. All right, so next we have, we're still in chapter 1, by the way, Matthew. We've already got a bunch of problems. We got a problem with the genealogy here. We have not matching with Luke. We have a problem of the generations not matching reality. And now we come to the birth of Christ, which is completely, first of all, it wasn't even in the originals. Mark is the original. And there was no, and by the way, Paul's letters, like I said, all Paul's letters were written, and he was dead. He was dead in the ground by 63, I think. 63 or 65. That's when they just started writing the gospel. So all Paul's letters were written and done, and he's dead by the time the gospels even start getting written. Because they're not even written until starting in 60 and through 70s and onward. And I'm not too sure after the fall of Jerusalem. You know what I'm saying? I got a lot to say about that, but I don't want to get off track. But the point is, Paul's letters were all written. You know what? He never said nothing about Jesus' virgin birth and his resurrection and none of that stuff. But anyway, so we get next still in chapter 1 of Matthew, we get to the birth of Jesus Christ. Huge problems. Huge problems. Now, what they're trying to do here, again, is like I said before, this is to appeal to the pagans, to the Romans. What do the Romans want? They want a demigod. They want half God, half man. Daddy being a god, mommy being a woman, earth woman, human. And together they're going to make a demigod, half man, half God, God. Like they've always done. You know what I mean? Through time. And so to appeal to these, they've added this. This was not in the original of Mark. But Matthew and Luke, again, are trying their hardest to appeal to these Romans. And so what do we have? We have a demigod. Voila. And by the way, I want to point out that Matthew favors Joseph and Luke favors Mary. Okay? And by the time you get to John, he can't stand Mary, and he has not once named her name. It's the woman, mother, whatever. It's anyway. But if you compare Matthew to Luke, Matthew favors Joseph in the story, and so what happens? Joseph gets the angel. The angel comes to Joseph in Matthew. Okay, so the angel comes and talks to Joseph in Matthew. But when you get to Luke, the angel is coming and talking to Mary. All right, and that's why Luke starts out, and we'll get to that when we get to Luke. I won't even get there. But anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked. We'll stay with Matthew. But so if you notice throughout Matthew, they're favoring Joseph. Joseph is talking to the angel. Joseph this, Joseph that. And Luke, it's going to be different. Luke is going to be the angel's talk. So here you have the angel telling Joseph, yeah, don't worry. This is your wife to be is going to have a boy, and you're going to call him Jesus, which is different because remember, they also say they're going to call him Emmanuel, which is so out of context from the Old Testament. Not even close to being a Messiah or anything like that. But anyway, so in Matthew, the angel talks to Joseph, and in Luke, the angel tells Mary she's going to have a pregnancy. And in Matthew, the angel talks to Joseph. So that's the difference there. Oh, I have an alarm going off. All right, now you get to the visit of the wise men. This is really different, okay? Because here's where it really completely splits off from Luke. All right, yeah, the angel came. One said, Mary, you're going to have a baby from God. The other one said, Joseph, you're going to have a baby from God. Both of them said, don't worry about it. But when you get here, it really starts to split off. You have the visit of the wise men. Now, if you've ever seen any Christmas nativity, you always had the three wise men, and then you have the shepherds in the field in these school plays or the church plays. No, no, no. That's not how it works. First of all, there's not three wise men. There's probably a herd of them. And so here's where the story is different. Matthew has the three wise men story. Luke doesn't. Matthew's story is going to last 2 years of Jesus' birth. Luke's story is going to only last 60 days or something. Not long. Maybe 30 days. Luke, they go down, they have the baby, bada bing, bada boom, they come back. In Matthew, it's this big adventure of them being exiled and running for their lives and going to Egypt, until Jesus is 2 years old. And then at 2 years old, the baby comes back, and after Herod dies and all that. And this is what you got here. So Matthew's got this huge, complicated story that makes no sense, and also has a different way. Now, for some reason, Matthew and Luke think that the Messiah has to be born in Bethlehem, which means house of bread. And that is not even what the Old Testament says. It says that the bloodline of the Messiah is coming from, which is David, right? Remember, David came from Bethlehem. So your bloodline is coming from not the baby, but Matthew and Luke seem to think that the baby has to be born in Bethlehem, which is not true. In fact, through the whole Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, who's ever writing these Gospels, are clueless to what the Old Testament says. And as a matter of fact, sometimes even, can I say lie, or, purposely writes things that aren't true to fudge it, to make it look like it's the Messiah from the Old Testament, but it's not. And so they have to twist things. And, but anyway, so here we are. I gotta let the dogs out. Hold on. They're ringing the bell and going crazy. Give me 2 seconds. All right, sorry about that. All right, now in the in Matthew, it's this big drawn out story. Like I said, in Matthew, you got a 2-year adventure here, like Indiana Jones kind of stuff. And Luke is not. Luke is very simple. They go down there, and both of them are lured down there for a different reason. Matthew has them both of them think that you have to have Jesus born in Bethlehem in order to be the Messiah, but that's not even true. Who's ever writing these Gospels they really don't know the Old Testament prophecies. It's like they heard stuff and they're trying to, anyway. But, so first the angel tells Joseph that you're going to have a baby and all this stuff. And don't worry about it. Then the visit of the wise men, they come. So Jesus goes to and is born in Bethlehem, right? So Jesus born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king. And so Herod heard this and he wants to kill that baby because he says, oh no, there's only going to be one king and it's me. So we got to kill this little baby when it gets born, right? So he secretly summoned the wise men. So anyway, now the funny thing is about this story is that the wise men come from the east. And it's not 3 wise men. It's probably a caravan of people. I don't know where they get the number 3, but anyway. It never says that. It just says wise men. So you got this people coming across the entire country to come to Judea, to Bethlehem, to see this king. And they follow a star, okay? Because what are the wise men? What are these wise men? They're called magi and astrologers. They are magicians and astrologers. Yes, that is what is actually happening here. You have astrologers and magicians coming from the east to see this king born, right? Because I heard about it. So this pack of magicians and astrologers follow a star. And they're following it all the way from the east. And when they get to Jerusalem, somehow the star stops working. I think it's one of them OnStar things the camels used to have. But the OnStar system stops working when they get to Jerusalem. So some reason they got to track down King Herod and ask him how to get to the king. The king, and Herod's like, oh, I don't like the sound of this. I'm the king, and we better off this baby as soon as it's born. So they started going again, and after listening, the king went on their way, and behold, the star they had seen rose and went before them. So that after they involve King Herod, for some reason, they're going to pull him into the story. So once they get King Herod involved in this baby birth thing of the king, then they go on their way, and the star starts working again. The OnStar system starts working. So they follow the stars, and somehow the star lands right over their house. Wait, house? I thought he was born in a manger. No. That's actually Luke's story. No, they're in a rented house. Anyway, so then, the wise men show up, and they give him the gifts and stuff, which, by the way, is frankincense, myrrh, silver, gold, or whatever, herbs and whatnots. Anyway, so then they're told, boy, Herod's going to kill all the babies. So, which, by the way, there is zero evidence that Herod he killed anybody under 2 years old. He never ordered that. The history books are clear back there. There was never and believe me, there are historians. There's historians like Josephus and all them other ones that were writing down everything these people did. He did not like Herod. They wrote down all the bad things Herod did. And if he would have done this, they would have wrote it down. But somehow, with no record of it, they're trying to tell you that Herod killed all the babies under 2 years old in the land. And somehow Jesus escaped down to Egypt. Well, anyway, so he's down in Egypt for 2 years, right? So Herod kills all the children, somehow misses Jesus. And by the way, he would have had to also miss John the Baptist, his cousin. And I don't know, I suppose maybe he was in a scene and they lived out in the caves. I don't know. But somehow John the Baptist escaped too, because remember, they were born at the same time. Who he would have also been under 2 years old. So anyway, they escaped from the wise men. And then after they found out Herod was dead and they found out it was safe to come back, then they returned to Nazareth. So there you go. His is a 2-year, this birth story lasts 2 years of Jesus. Luke's, like I said, 2 weeks, and they're back home. And the reason for Jesus the reason Joseph and Mary had to go to Bethlehem, they had to, what do they call that? The premise for the plot. They have to somehow get him born. Okay, he's living in Nazareth, but how can he be born? How can we make him be born in Bethlehem? I know. Let's say Herod is going to come kill everybody, and so we have to get out of here. Okay, we'll do that. And then Luke has the same problem. Okay, somehow we have to have Jesus not born in Nazareth, but born in Bethlehem, because they don't understand the prophecy. So in order for Luke to have him born in Bethlehem, he actually, he has him go down for a tax census, which makes no sense. As a matter of fact, you can go see when the tax census were, and it wasn't anywhere near those years. And they just like today, they will give, do they have a census? When you get a census, do you have to go back to where you're born? I mean, good grief. my family would have to go all different directions to go back to where we were born and have this whole point of the census is to see how many people are living in the city. You don't go back to where you're born. It makes no sense. Anyways, but Matthew, he's going because the Herod's chasing him, so they had to, be born in Bethlehem. And then in Luke, he had to be born in Bethlehem because there's a tax audit or something. Anyway, so in Matthew, once Herod, killed everybody, they had to be exiled and they had to run and be what do they call them? Refugees. They're refugees down in Egypt. So they go to Africa, and that's why. And also, they falsely tell you that this is to also fulfill a prophecy that when Jesus said, "My son comes out of Africa or Egypt or whatever," and what book is that? I used to have it memorized. But anyway, Old Testament prophecy where the Messiah comes out of Egypt, but it's not the Messiah. It is I think it's Hosea chapter 1 or 2 or 1.2, something like that. Anyway, it says, out of Africa, my children came, or something like that. They're talking about the Israelites being brought out of Egypt. But anyway, Herod kills all the children with absolutely no record on file. Like I said, Josephus and all them other historians wrote down all the horrible things Herod did. Do you think they would have left this out, killing all the babies? I don't think so. Not only that, but Herod would have had to kill half the people in that town were probably his relatives. You know what I mean? Makes no sense. They return to Nazareth. Then after, the boogeyman's gone, then they go back. And that way they're back. So they did their thing. Anyway, that was a 2-year escapade there. And Luke's birth in Bethlehem, took 2 weeks or something. I remember that on the 8th day, they brought him to the temple to be circumcised, and then they went home. So 10 days? Week and a half. Matthew, though, has a 2-year, like I said, something like Indiana Jones episode there. Anyway, so chapter 3, John the Baptist prepares the way. This is kind of funny. I don't even know how much I want to get into this. But anyway, what's funny about the Baptist and John the Baptist, again, if you look in the progression of the Gospels, so you could go Mark was first, then Matthew, then Luke, then John. And if you look at the progression of the baptism in all 4 of those Gospels, start with Mark. Mark is Jesus just getting baptized. He's just one of the guys getting baptized. Then you go to Matthew, and it gets a little more dramatic. God's speaking stuff, Yeah, I'll get to that point. Anyway, as the Gospels get written further down, the story gets bigger and bigger. So in Mark, it's not really too much. And you'd have to ask yourself, people think he's without sin and perfect and all that, then why is he being baptized? Anyway, they never really explain that. And then there's a baptism. So in Matthew, this is not a big deal. John baptizes Jesus, done. Jesus is not, is not anything different. He's getting baptized like everybody else. But when you get to Matthew and Luke, they're saying, hey, wait a minute. Why are we baptized? The kind of common sense kicks in. Wait a minute. Why are we baptizing Jesus? He should be baptizing us, right? Right? Well, that's not what they said in the first gospel. But it's starting to dawn on these writers that John would have prevented him saying, I need to be baptized by you. So he's asking John to baptize, and John's like, whoa, you should be baptizing me. So it's starting to kick in that, wait a minute, Mark just said, the original gospel that in these 4, it didn't say nothing like this. But all of a sudden, they're starting to puff Jesus up saying, oh, you should be baptizing us. And Jesus says, let it be so now. So this is kind of vague. And then you get to, here you go. Chapter 4 is the temptation of Jesus. And I'll tell you what. It says God can't be tempted, so what's even the point? If Jesus is God, why are you trying to tempt him? Tempt him with what? Stuff he already owns? Tempt him with the world, all the things of the world? Doesn't he already own that? Tempt him with the kingdoms, he already owns that. And tempt him with food, he owns that. You're tempting him with stuff he already owns if he's God. Temptation, and by the way, there are so many differences in these temptations. Yeah, the similarities. I gotta let my dogs in. All right, now they're back at the road. Yeah, they're gonna come back here in a minute. But it just is kind of strange. And by the way, one of the big differences in these two baptism stories, temptation stories. Now, one of them, I'm going to say right here. So Matthew, in the temptation of Matthew, Jesus is tempted after fasting 40. Here, Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after fasting 40 days and night, he was hungry. And that's when the tempter came, okay? So you're tempting him after the 40 days. Now, in the other Gospels, he's tempted during the 40 days or before the 40 days. The time is different. So anyway, he'd be more desperate in this one. And I think that dawned on them. Why would we have him tempt? Anyway, so the temptation is a different timeline. And then he tempted him with all these different things. You know what I think is strange? The devil took him to the holy city, which is Jerusalem, put him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down. You know what's funny about this? The other writings tell you that Jesus' brother, James, he stayed in Jerusalem and headed the Christian church or whatever, and they threw him off from where? Romans ran from long before Jesus was born. The Romans ran Jerusalem and Israel and stuff. So the Romans were in charge long before Jesus came. Very long. So when Jesus was born into actually a society of Roman rule, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't take matters into their own hands or anything like that. And because the king gives the orders. So James, the story goes that he was thrown off the pinnacle of the temple in between kings. One king died, and before the next one would be put into place in that tiny little space, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and stuff, the leaders of the church took over temporarily, and that's when they supposedly threw James off the point of the temple. So I just wonder if they threw that in there in reference to that story, because that's where his brother was thrown to his death. Threw him down and to the crowd below, and he didn't die, so then they beat him and stuff until he died. But anyway, that was supposedly from the pinnacle of the temple. Interesting. But anyway, so all these temptations, and then after the devil left him, behold, angels came and were ministering to him. Now, what's funny is then his ministry begins, and in Mark, the ministry he already had the ministry. When he shows up in where is it? Capernaum, I think. In the original, Jesus shows up, I think, in Capernaum first. That's where he meets Peter and Andrew and some of the disciples. But they're barking to get in. Hold on a second. Oh, you guys are covered with snow. Not my chair, not my chair. Oh, hold on a second, guys. I gotta dry them off. Everybody. All right. Get off my chair. Get off. Stop. Get down. Come on, Caleb. Shut up. Get down, Caleb. Get off my chair. Come on. All right. Covered with snow. They look like blankets of snow on them when they came in. They want me to wash them or wipe them down when they come in, so I do. They like it. Anyway, so then Jesus begins his ministry. Here we are, leaving Nazareth. He went and lived in Capernaum. And I mean, I could go on forever on the differences here. In fact, 194 or something like that contradictions in the Gospels will tell you that I'm not even scratching the surface here. Jesus calls the first disciples. Now, this is different in different Gospels. In here, they call Peter, Simon, Andrew's brother, and all this. So the stories don't really match exact, which is not, I guess, a big deal. But if it's a perfect word of God, why don't they? Why don't the way that they picked the disciples all match in the four Gospels? But they don't. Picked them in different order. And by the way, even if you, and I don't know how many Gospels, but some of the Gospels will give you a list of the 12 disciples, and go compare those. Go compare those. Go compare the list of the 12 Gospels. I could do it right now. Nailed it once again, like poetry explains. So thank you. I'm hoping I'm helping somebody, because I'm going to tell you, when you come out of this religion, finally things can make sense. Finally you can be yourself. Finally, you don't have to live by laws that are actually, some are psychopathic. And you don't have to hate people, and you don't have to do all these horrible things that you're taught. So it is so freeing. I watch. I really like Godless Granny. I watched her live stream today. Made a couple comments. There's so many of them. I should because they make all these good points too. And this is stuff you can probably, when people do, they live their whole life, go to church, listen to, read the Bible here and there, whatever, but until you sit down and study, or easier yet, when somebody like me has already studied and I can point them out, but once somebody points these out to you, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And this stuff, enough will start clicking in your head that, hey, wait a minute. Are they trying to be pagans? Yes. Are they trying to be Roman demigods? Yes. Are there a lot of mistakes? Oh, yeah. The contradictions, every page. And so this mending their nets and immediately followed him. Now, imagine that too. Not once in these Gospels that they say Jesus was glowing like a lantern or anything like that. Because then when you watch the movies and Jesus is walking on the shore, and he's calling Peter and Andrew and away from their nets and everything. Well, he just says, "Follow me. I'll make you fishers of men." And everybody just drops what they're doing. Don't even know this guy. Leave your dad high and dry. Another guy says, "Oh wait, I gotta bury my father," which, by the way, Jewish tradition is so serious about when you have a family member die. The burial routines and stuff like that are so strict. And for a Jewish man would never tell another person to forget burying your dad. He's dead anyway. Come and follow me. On what basis? On what basis are they dropping everything and following him? He hasn't done anything. He doesn't know these people. He comes into town, walks down the shore. Can you imagine walking down the shore and telling people, going up to fishers and say, "Follow me. I'll make you fishers of men," and they just take off with you? Leave their dad, leave their family, leave their wives and children and their responsibility, and just follow this guy? It doesn't, like I said, nowhere does it say he was glowing like God or God told him to follow. Nothing. You're just supposed to say, oh, they must have known. It doesn't say he must have known. Immediately they left their nets and followed him. It makes it makes no sense. And as a matter of fact, in the Gospel of John, I think it's the Gospel of John, which really gets far out there, which is why they call Matthew, Mark, Luke the synoptic gospels, because they all look the same, kind of, for the most part. But John is off the rails. And so in John, John is different than these. But anyway, when Jesus calls the disciples, this part is different. But anyway, I'll get to John when I get to John. I don't want to confuse anyway, but we'll stick to Matthew. He ministers to great crowds. So, he went throughout Galilee, teaching in the synagogues, proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom, healing every disease and every affliction among people. His fame spread throughout Syria, and they brought him all the sick, demons, seizures, everything. Okay, paralyzed people, healed them all. Great crowds. Now, the problem with this is that when you ask a Christian, what makes you think Jesus is the Messiah? Well, he healed all those people. Well, guess what? That's not on your checklist of Messiah duties. The duty of the Messiah is not to come heal people. Hello. And as a matter of fact, there are all kinds of people in the Bible before Jesus who could heal people. Before all this, people could heal people. As a matter of fact, you said, well, Jesus actually brought somebody back to life. Well, actually, so did Paul and, was it Barnabas or whoever? Paul laid on that one kid that fell out the window. It was supposedly dead and brought him back to life. Well, that's because he had the Holy Spirit. Jesus. Okay, let's go back to the Old Testament. 2 people brought somebody back to life. Who was it? It was Elijah and Elisha, I think. Can't remember, but 2 people in the Old Testament brought somebody back to life. So anyway, healing and bringing people back to life is not on the list of the Messiah at all. The Old Testament Messiah has nothing to do with healing, nothing to do with miracles, and nothing like that. This is going to be a regular guy. He's not going to be a god. His dad's not going to be God. He's not going to be a demigod. He's not going to be God at all. He's just going to be a regular guy from the bloodline of David through Solomon. He's not going to do miracles. Not on his checklist. He's going to sit on the throne in Jerusalem, and they're going to rule the world. And they're going, according to the Old Testament, the Jews are going to all come back to Jerusalem, because right now they're scattered through the world. They're all going to come back to Jerusalem. So in the Old Testament, what does this Messiah do? He brings all families together. All the families all reunite again in Jerusalem. Now, what does Jesus say about families? I've come to divide families with the sword. Divide them, spread them apart. Well, that's opposite of the Old Testament. The Old Testament said the Messiah is going to bring families together. As a matter of fact, it's almost word for word. Mother, father's uncle, whatever, your blood, because there's Jewish people in Canada. They're all over the world. But they're going to all return back to the homeland. And then there'll be a temple. That's why the Jews right now are trying to build a temple, because they need a temple so the Messiah can sit on that throne of David again in that spot, the spot where the mosque is right now, the mosque. Well, that's the spot that they want to, and that's the spot where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac, that exact spot. So it has to be there. It has to be a temple. Well, it doesn't even have to be a temple. According to them, they only need an altar. All right, a throne and an altar, and then you can get back in business. But that's what the job of the Messiah in the Old Testament is, to come. He's going to, and there's been, believe me, the Jewish people have every year they have somebody that thinks that they're the Messiah. But then what do they, first thing they do? They test their bloodline. They do a DNA test, see if you're from the bloodline of David. If you're not, out. And if you are, well, then what else? There's other qualifications, but nothing about doing miracles or healing people or anything like that. So, it seems like the New Testament, the Gospels especially, are trying to fulfill a bunch of messianic prophecies that aren't even true. They're not even requirements. The Old Testament says that man is going to sit on the throne, and they're going to actually not only rule Jerusalem and Israel again, but they're actually going to solve the matters of the worldwide affairs. So like other countries that have problems, they're gonna go to their court, and they're gonna rule the world. Nothing about doing miracles or anything like this. So all this about doing miracles and all this stuff, it's not even in the story. All right, chapter 5. Now, chapter 5 through 7 is the Sermon on the Mount, right? Sermon on the Mount. Well, funny thing here is that Matthew says it's a Sermon on the Mount, and actually, if you look at the Google map of the Sea of Galilee, and by the way, the name of the Sea of Galilee has changed over the years. It was the Sea of Galilee. It was, and then when Tiberius was the governor, they changed it to Lake Tiberias. It is just a big lake. It's not an ocean or a sea or anything. Back then they called everything, any gathering of water, they called it sea. So it was the Sea of Galilee. Then it was a Lake Tiberias, and now I think it's something else. I can't remember. But if you look at Google Map there, and at the north end of the map, there is a mountain. This is kind of probably where it was. So this was Sermon on the Mount. And the thing about Matthew is into mountains big time. I don't know how many times, I could ask Google right now, how many stories, you just pay attention when you read Matthew, how many times in Matthew do they bring up a mountain? Everything is a mountain. He went to a mountain, there's a mountain, here's a mountain, there's a mountain. He's all full of mountain stories. Now, the funny thing is, in Luke, when you get to the Gospel of Luke, it's a sermon on the flat plains. You know what I mean? So Matthew thinks it's on a mountain because he thinks everything happens on a mountain. But when you get to Luke, it's going to be sermon on the flat plains. All right, and it's not 3 chapters like 5, 6, 7 like it is here. Luke is pretty short. It's kind of abbreviated version. His happens on a flat plain. And the funny thing is, Luke's couldn't have happened where he said it happened because, well, I'll get to that. I'll get to that in a minute. So anyway, Matthew has Sermon on the Mount. Now, actually, these are some half-decent things, you know what I mean? Good rules to live by. And he does kind of change the laws of Moses a little bit, even though he said, I've not come to change the law, but to, kind of like, perfect it or whatever. Christ came to fulfill the law, which is kind of funny because there's a couple laws that he does change. Now, you're not supposed to, a Jewish man would never try to change the laws of Moses, and Jesus obviously was Jewish. But he does change a couple things, even though he says he's not going to, he does. He changes the law about divorce. The law about divorce in Moses' law is that, and you have to understand marriage in the Old Testament. Marriage in the Old Testament is not, they didn't have the word marriage. It was a man goes and purchases a woman or girl, a young girl, from another family. He pays them for that girl. So when a family, a man and a woman, well, let's just say the man, because the man's the only thing that really matters in the Bible. So when the man he goes and buys as many wives as he can afford. All right. And he goes to a family, a father, and he picks out the woman and he pays that father, like buying a sheep or a goat or whatever, but he pays that father a dowry, and then he takes that daughter. So when you have boys and girls, the boys are the only keepers. The girls, you're just going to sell later. They're like livestock. So you got to raise them and feed them, and then you're going to try to get a high price for them. So there is no marriage in the Old Testament or the New Testament for that matter. The new versions say marriage and wedding and all this. It's not. It's still the same concept. You purchase the woman. It ain't no sitting under the apple tree and dating and nothing like that. You're bought. If you're a woman, a young girl, you're bought by whoever buys you. And so the man who, and you're just a possession, even in the New Testament too, it does not change. The woman is a possession, just like a house, just like a goat, a sheep, a horse, whatever. The woman is a bought, purchased possession. And so he can have as many purchased possessions as he wants. And if he buys one he doesn't like, he can write her a bill of divorce, which means go away. Here's your legal thing. So when you try to go get remarried, you won't be killed for adultery. So he has to give you a letter of divorce that says, I don't want you anymore. Go away. And here's your letter that says, I don't own you anymore. And then she can go and try to be bought from somebody else. All right, that's how it is. So in the Old Testament, Moses' law, he says, God, right, tells Moses and the Israelites that you can get rid of that woman for any reason you want. Maybe she'll cook right, or you don't like her, or whatever. Any reason, you don't even need a reason. Just give her a release paper, which is a divorce. It's a separation paper. That means that you can go be bought by somebody else and you won't get killed. And so that's the law of Moses. But when you get to Jesus here and he's doing the Sermon on the Mount, I'll get to anger, lust, divorce. Here, divorce. So it was said, whoever divorces is, and this is, by the way, he is quoting Moses here. Jesus says, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say, now this is it. If the man doesn't like that woman he bought, and that's why actually in the 10 Commandments, it'll tell you the 10th commandment is you shall not covet your neighbor's house, wife, donkeys, Harley Davidson, whatever, right? She's just on the list of items that you own. And so also when they come to adultery, a man can only be charged of adultery if you're in sex with another man's wife, another man's purchased belongings, or the wife, right? And so Moses said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give a certificate of divorce, what I just explained. Now, a Jewish man would never change Moses' law. Never would even think of it. But Jesus does change a couple of these Moses laws. What he says he wasn't going to do, he does. Now, it is said by who it's Moses' law, whoever divides, you give her a certificate of divorce. You don't need a reason. You don't want her anymore. But I say to you, so here's where he changes that law, that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. Whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now this just makes no sense. But I say whoever divorces his wife, now they're talking about the man, okay? The man is the only one that can choose if you get divorced or not, because a purchased donkey cannot divorce their owner, right? And a purchased woman cannot divorce their owner, but the owner can get rid of the woman. But he says anyone who doesn't want their woman anymore, except for the ground of sexual immortality, makes her commit adultery. So now he's changing Moses' law, saying, before Moses said just write her a certificate so she can go marry somebody else. But he says, nope, can't do that. You're making her commit adultery for the next guy, and that makes no sense. That's not part of the law. And by the way, if she would, now just common sense, except on the ground of sexual immorality, what happens if your purchased woman commits sexual immorality? What happens? She's put to death. You don't divorce a woman for sexual immorality. She is put to death. So this makes no sense. You divorce her if she cheats on you? The law is very clear. She cheats on you, she's put to death with the guy that she cheated with. They have a quick little kangaroo court for about 30 minutes and they're put to death in front of everybody, side by side. So saying that you can divorce her if she has sex with somebody, that makes no sense. She'd be put to death. So none of this here makes sense. And a Jewish man would never even try to do that. And by the way, and when you get to, so Moses' law just got changed about the divorce. And guess when else it gets changed? When you get to Paul. And remember, Paul's letters have already been written. So Paul says, okay, we're going to also change Paul also changed it. Paul says, you can get divorced, even though you used to be able to get divorced from your woman wherever you want. Now, he says, Paul, when you get to Paul says, okay, you can divorce her if she doesn't have the same faith as you. Okay, so now if she doesn't have the same religion of you, you can divorce her. Well, Moses said you can divorce whatever you want. And by the way, didn't Abraham and all these other people have purchased women and slaves, sex slaves and everything from Egypt? Anyway, that makes no sense. Oaths, again, the oaths. That makes no sense. Retaliation, all this. Love your enemies. So again, the eye for an eye thing, that gets retaliation. You heard it said that eye for eye, tooth for tooth. When he says you heard it said, that means, if you heard it said, an eye for eye, tooth for tooth, that means Moses' law. This is a law that all the Jewish people, to this day, well, they want to follow it, but, they can't kill people and stuff anymore. But even when Jesus was alive, the Romans ruled Jerusalem and Israel. So the Romans were in charge of Jerusalem, and you had to go to them. That's why they had to go to Pontius Pilate. They couldn't just kill Jesus or whoever they want. They have to go to the court system and the Roman courts. But I say to you, do not resist the one who's evil. Anyone who slaps you on the right cheek, let him slap the other also. How many Christians have you seen getting smacked and then getting smacked again? And then how many Christians have you seen get sued in a court of law and just hand over everything they have and then give them extra too? Nothing. I've never seen a Christian do any of it. None. It doesn't even make sense. In fact, this retaliation goes also against Moses' law. The eye for an eye they still believe in that. Like I said, they can't really take the law in their own hands because it just doesn't work like that anymore. Love your enemies and all that. Okay. So Sermon on the Mount 5, 6, and 7 given to a lot of it is good. Some of it, if you want to get technical, it does go against Moses' law, which he said he wasn't going to do. And so 5 through 7 is that. And off the top of my head, I don't know. Like I said, if you could, Luke's Sermon on the Mount, which is on a flat field, you're going to have just a fraction of that. And it's funny because at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, and when Jesus finished saying these things, the crowds are astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes, which is kind of funny. Teaching like he had authority. He was teaching them like he had authority, but he didn't. All right. Chapter 8, Jesus cleanses the leper. Again, the Messiah is not here to cleanse lepers and heal anybody, none of this proves he's a Messiah. Faith in the century. And you know what? This story, I'm going to tell you right now, this story right here, the faith of a century, this is very, very offensive to the Jewish people. I have heard the rabbis more than once speak on this one. Now think about this. The faith of a centurion. Remember this? Jesus is approached by a when he entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward him, appealing to him, Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed, suffering. Can you come help him? Lord says, yeah, I can do that. And he says, I'm not worthy. Maybe his house was messy or something. He said, I don't really want you coming into my house, but can you do it from here? And he said, yep, can do. And so he heals the guy. And what Jesus says is very strange. When Jesus heard, because he said, I know that you are, he says, I order my guys around, and I'm sure that you've got more power than me, so I'm sure you can do it. And Jesus said he marveled at the man who followed him and says, truly I tell you, no one in Israel have I found such faith. Really? Do you know how offensive this is to the Jewish people? The rabbis have said this. I don't know how many times I've heard him speak on this. So this guy who believes that Jesus can, heal him from a distance, is one of his workers from a distance. He tells this Roman pagan. Now he's a pagan. Okay, this guy doesn't believe in the God of Moses. He doesn't probably believe in any God. Maybe some pagan gods, but this guy, this Roman, off this guy's saying, yeah, I believe you can heal him. He says, I have found no greater faith in Israel. So he's saying Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, all of them. You just wiped out the whole Old Testament hero category. All of the heroes of the Old Testament. You're telling me this Roman guy has had more faith than you've ever seen in your life or ever heard of. That's crazy. Anyway, that's very offensive to a lot of, I won't speak for all of them, but the ones I've heard don't like that. Yeah, because you just threw everybody in the Old Testament under the bus. Everybody. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Noah, all of them. Job. More faith in Job? This guy, this Roman soldier, by the way, the ones who have oppressed them and put their boot on the Jews' necks for years and decades, he's the guy that you're saying is better than anybody you ever heard of? Wow, that's a slap in the face. Anyway, so all that stuff I don't believe Jesus would have ever said. And by the way, let's just put this in. I don't believe Jesus said any of this stuff. Because why? Because Jesus was the only one that I know that knew how to read or write, remember? They made a point many times, over and over, that the disciples, none of them knew how to read or write. None of them. Illiterate. Don't even know how to barely speak their own language. I mean, totally illiterate. Can't read, can't write. Matthew might have been the only one that could maybe add math because he was a tax collector. Hey, it's enough. Because Matthew was a tax collector doesn't even mean necessarily that he even knew how to read or write. All the tax collectors had to know was how to count money. And so Matthew probably didn't even know, but they made a point to tell you over and over, none of them knew how to read or write. Only Jesus, apparently, because even when he was a child, he knew how to read these scriptures and he knew how to write things, right? But somehow he never picked up a pen and paper and wrote, or a sheepskin and a quill. He never wrote anything down his whole life. Being with a bunch of people who don't know how to read or write, don't you think he would have been the one writing stuff down? How did these disciples write anything down? They didn't. They don't know how to read or write. So the one that should have been writing things down, first of all, was Jesus. And second of all, it seems logical because he's the only one that knows how to read or write. So yeah, I don't believe he wrote any of this. Because he would have wrote it at the time. He wouldn't have waited till he died and then let everybody else who weren't even disciples write all this stuff. That makes no sense. Wouldn't he have written it when he was here? Starting with the time he was a child and he impressed all the people at the temple? Well, start writing stuff then. Then when you're 30 and you start your ministry, you can hand everybody out your pamphlets and stuff. Anyway, the cost of following Jesus. And you know what's funny? People think that Jesus was homeless and he didn't own anything. And right here, this is one of the scriptures that people write. Well, Jesus didn't have a home; he was homeless. He said, "Foxes have holes and birds have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Oh, he was homeless? No, it's not at all what this means. He wasn't homeless. As a matter of fact, in the Gospel of John, when he first comes to Capernaum, what do? Jesus invites I can't remember. I think it's Peter and Andrew, but no, maybe it was John. Anyway, in the Gospel of John, first, right off the bat, when Jesus comes into town in Capernaum, what's the first thing he does? Invites John and I think James. Anyway, he invites a couple of the guys over to his place. It's 4:00 in the afternoon, and they headed over to Jesus's house. Headed to where? Yeah, Jesus's house. Yeah, he had a house. And so what the foxes have holes thing? Well, this let's read it in context. Cost of following Jesus. It's nothing about Jesus being homeless. Now, when Jesus saw a crowd around him, he gave